They thought they were just enforcing the law, but they were actually signing their own careers' death warrants. When 70-year-old Otis and Martha were dragged out of their brand-new luxury truck and handcuffed on the hot asphalt, the officers sneered, convinced that two black seniors couldn't possibly afford a vehicle like that. They ignored the receipts. They ignored the pleas. They thought they had all the power. But they didn't know that the stolen truck belonged to a man who hunted terrorists for a living, and he was just pulling into the parking lot. You are not going to believe the karma that hit these corrupt officers. The mid-July heat in Alabama hung heavy over the town of Pine Bluff, a place where the magnolias bloomed large and memories, unfortunately, faded slowly. For Otis and Martha Reynolds, however, today was not a day to worry about the past or the humidity. It was a day of celebration. Otis, a man whose hands were calloused from 40 years of carpentry, adjusted his tie in the rear-view mirror of the pristine, midnight blue GMC Denali. The truck was a beast of a machine, chrome accents gleaming, leather seats smelling of rich conditioners, and an engine that purred with a quiet, expensive confidence. It was a gift, a surprise delivered just that morning for their 50th wedding anniversary. "Otis, stop fidgeting with that tie," Martha said gently, her voice carrying the soft rasp of age and wisdom. She smoothed the skirt of her Sunday best, a floral print she'd saved for a special occasion. "You look handsome as ever." "I just can't believe he did this, Marty," Otis said, shaking his head as he gripped the leather steering wheel. "I taught the boy to save his money, not spend it on a tank like this." Martha chuckled, looking out the window as they cruised down Main Street. "David is a grown man, Otis, a captain in the United States Marine Corps. If he wants to spoil his parents after being deployed for 18 months, you let him." They were on their way to Le Saint-Clair, the only upscale restaurant in Pine Bluff, where David had told them to meet him. He had flown in late last night, tired and covered in the dust of a foreign desert, but he had promised he wouldn't miss this lunch. Otis drove carefully, respecting the speed limit with the reverence of a man who had spent his life following the rules. He signaled a full 3 seconds before turning right onto the boulevard that led to the shopping district. The town was busy. Summer tourists were mingling with locals, and the sidewalks were crowded. As they passed the local precinct, Otis noticed a patrol car pulling out. He didn't think much of it. He had lived in Pine Bluff his whole life. He knew most of the officers by name, or at least by face. He kept his eyes on the road, humming a low gospel tune. But the patrol car didn't turn away. It stayed behind them. "Otis," Martha murmured, her hand instinctively going to the dashboard. "That police car is awfully close." Otis glanced in the mirror. The black and white Charger was tailing them, bumper to bumper. "Probably just running the plates, Marty. It's a new truck. Temporary tags, they're just checking." He tried to remain calm, but a cold knot tightened in his stomach. He knew the reality of driving while black in certain parts of the county, even at 70 years old. But he reassured himself. He was a deacon at the church. Everyone knew Otis. Then the lights flashed. Blue and red strobes bounced off the pristine chrome of the new truck. "Here we go," Otis sighed, clicking the indicator and slowly pulling over into the parking lot of a strip mall, right in front of a busy coffee shop. "Just keep your hands where they can see them, honey," Martha whispered, her joy from moments ago evaporating into fear. Otis put the truck in park, rolled down the window, and placed his large, rough hands at the 10 and 2 positions on the wheel. "I know, Marty. I know." In the side mirror, he saw the officers exit the vehicle. There were 2 of them. One was a rookie he didn't recognize, young, nervous, hand hovering too close to his holster. But the other one, Otis's heart sank. It was Officer Greg "Buck" Miller. Miller was known around Pine Bluff, but not for his community service. He was a man who wore his badge like a crown and his gun like a scepter. He had a reputation for harassment that the local council always seemed to sweep under the rug. He was big, red-faced, and walked with a swagger that suggested he was looking for a fight. Miller approached the driver's side, chewing gum aggressively, his sunglasses hiding his eyes, but not the sneer on his lips. He didn't say hello. He didn't ask for license and registration. "Turn the engine off," Miller barked, leaning down so his face was inches from the open window. "Keys on the dash, now." "Afternoon, Officer Miller," Otis said, his voice steady despite the trembling in his knees. "Is there a problem? I was doing 25. "I said keys on the dash," Miller shouted, his hand dropping to rest on the butt of his pistol. Otis complied slowly, placing the fob on the dashboard. "Officer, this is my vehicle. I have the papers right here in the—" "Don't you reach for nothing," the rookie on the passenger side yelled, startling Martha. She let out a small gasp, pressing her back against the seat. "Get out of the car," Miller ordered. "Both of you." Slowly. "Officer, my wife has bad knees," Otis pleaded. "Can't we just discuss this here? What did we do?" "I'm not going to ask you again, boy." Miller spat, the derogatory term hanging in the humid air like a foul smell. "Step out of the vehicle or I will drag you out." Otis looked at Martha. Her eyes were wide with terror. He nodded slowly. "It's okay, Marty. Just do as he says." They opened the doors. The moment Otis's foot touched the pavement, Miller grabbed him by the shoulder, spinning him around and slamming him face first against the side of the brand-new truck. "Hey, watch the paint!" Otis cried out instinctively, then groaned as his arm was wrenched behind his back. "Stop resisting!" Miller roared for the benefit of the gathering crowd. "I'm not resisting!" Otis grunted, pain shooting through his arthritic shoulder. On the other side, the rookie was handling Martha with clumsy aggression. He pulled her arm too hard, and she stumbled. "Please, young man, I'm 70 years old," she cried, tears spilling onto her cheeks. "My purse is in the car, my heart medication." "Shut up and face the vehicle," the rookie stammered, trying to mimic Miller's bravado. Within seconds, the two elderly grandparents, dressed in their Sunday best, were handcuffed and pressed against the side of the truck they had been so proud of just minutes ago. A crowd was forming outside the coffee shop. Phones were coming out. People were whispering, pointing, and recording. "What is this about?" Otis demanded, his cheek pressed against the hot metal. "Tell me why I'm being arrested." Miller leaned in close to Otis's ear. "We got a report of a stolen vehicle matching this description. A $70,000 truck driven by a couple of locals who can't even afford to fix their porch? Yeah, right. You're going downtown for grand theft auto, Otis." The accusation hit Otis like a physical blow. "Stolen? This truck was a gift. My son bought it for us this morning. The papers are in the glove box. Check the glove box." Miller laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "A gift. Right. And I suppose your son is the Prince of Zamunda? You expect me to believe you have a son who can drop 70 grand cash on a ride like this?" "He's a Marine," Martha cried out from the other side of the truck, her voice shaking. "Captain David Reynolds. He's meeting us for lunch." "A Marine," Miller mocked, tightening the cuffs on Otis's wrists until the metal bit into the skin. "Sure, sweetheart. And I'm the Tooth Fairy. Look at you two. You really think you can drive a car like this through my town and nobody would notice? This screams drug money or theft. And since I know you're too old to be running drugs, I'm guessing you stole the keys from a valet or a dealership." "Check the registration," Otis shouted, his dignity fracturing under the weight of the public humiliation. He could see people he knew in the crowd, Mrs. Higgins from the bakery, the young cashier from the grocery store. They looked confused, scared. No one stepped in. Fear of Miller ran deep in Pine Bluff. "We'll check everything when we get you to the station and book you," Miller said. He stepped back and keyed his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 4 Alpha. Suspects in custody. Send a tow truck for the vehicle. Proceeding with transport." "No," Martha wailed. "Don't tow it. David is coming." Miller ignored her. He grabbed Otis by the back of his neck, forcing him to walk backward toward the patrol car. "You move when I say move." Otis stumbled. His hip, which had been giving him trouble for years, seized up. "Officer, please, I can't walk that fast backward." "Walk!" Miller shoved him. Otis lost his footing and fell to one knee on the asphalt, scraping his suit pants. The crowd gasped. A young woman stepped forward, phone raised. "Hey, he's an old man. You don't have to treat him like that." Miller whipped his head around, pointing a finger at the woman. "Back up unless you want to join them for obstruction of justice. Back up!" The crowd retreated slightly, but the phones stayed up. Miller didn't care. He felt untouchable. He had been running this beat for 15 years. He knew how to write the report. Suspect resisted. Suspect lunged. Reasonable force applied. He hauled Otis up by the arm, nearly dislocating it. Otis gritted his teeth, refusing to give Miller the satisfaction of a scream. He looked over at Martha. The rookie had her pinned against the truck, looking unsure of himself, but too afraid of Miller to stop. "It's okay, Marty," Otis called out, his voice cracking. "God is watching. God is watching all of this." "God ain't on the payroll, Otis," Miller sneered as he shoved Otis into the cramped back seat of the cruiser. The plastic seat was hard, and the heat inside was stifling. As Miller went back to grab Martha, a low rumble began to vibrate through the parking lot. It wasn't the sound of a normal car. It was the deep, throaty roar of a high-performance engine, distinct and aggressive. A matte black Dodge Challenger Hellcat turned into the parking lot, moving with a precision that suggested a driver who knew exactly how to handle horsepower. The car didn't park in a spot. It pulled up directly perpendicular to the police cruiser and the truck, blocking the exit. Miller paused, his hand on Martha's arm. He looked at the Challenger. Who the hell is this now? The driver's door of the Challenger opened. A boot hit the ground. Tan, tactical, and polished. Then the man emerged. He stood 6'4", a wall of muscle packed into a perfectly tailored dress uniform. The olive-green jacket was adorned with ribbons that caught the sunlight. Purple Heart, bronze star with valor. Combat action. Ribbon. On his shoulders, the silver bars of a captain glinted. Captain David Reynolds removed his sunglasses slowly. His face was a mask of stone, but his eyes were burning with a cold, lethal fury. He took in the scene in a single second. His father in the back of a police car, his mother handcuffed against the truck he had bought her, and 2 cops manhandling them. He didn't yell. He didn't run. He walked toward them with a terrifying, rhythmic calmness. "Officer!" David's voice boomed, deep and authoritative, carrying across the lot without him needing to shout. "Step away from my mother." Miller bristled. He didn't like being told what to do, even by a man in uniform. He puffed out his chest, resting his hand on his belt. "Back in your vehicle, soldier boy. This is an active crime scene. These suspects are under arrest for grand theft auto." David didn't stop walking until he was 3 feet from Miller. He towered over the cop. I said, "Step away from my mother. Now." And I said, "Back off." Miller unclipped the retention strap on his holster. "I don't care if you're the general of the army. You interfere with my arrest, and you're going down too." David looked at the rookie holding Martha. The rookie was trembling. He saw the rank on David's shoulders. He saw the way David carried himself. "Let her go, Marine," the rookie stammered, confused by the terminology, calling him Marine as a plea rather than an insult. David's eyes snapped back to Miller. Grand Theft Auto? That truck is registered to Otis and Martha Reynolds. I bought it at Odell 800 hours this morning from the dealership across town. The bill of sale is in the glove box. Yeah, that's what they all say, Miller spat. We'll sort it out at the station. Now move your car, or I'm calling a tow for that one too. David tilted his head slightly. He reached into his pocket. Gun! Miller shouted, drawing his weapon and aiming it at David's chest. The crowd screamed. David didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. He slowly pulled his hand out, holding a cell phone. You point a weapon at a commissioned officer of the United States Armed Forces who is unarmed and presenting no threat? David asked, his voice dropping an octave, becoming dangerously quiet. You just made the biggest mistake of your life, Miller. How do you know my name? Miller's gun wavered slightly. Because, David said, tapping the screen of his phone. I'm not just calling a lawyer. I'm on a video call. He turned the screen around. On the display was the face of a man sitting in a grand office with the state flag behind him. It was Police Chief Harrison, but he wasn't alone. Sitting next to him was the district attorney. Miller! The voice from the phone was tinny but unmistakable. It was Chief Harrison screaming, "Put that damn gun down immediately!" Miller froze. He looked at the phone, then at David, then at the crowd recording him. "Chief," Miller stammered. "I am having lunch with Captain Reynolds' commanding officer," the chief yelled through the speaker. "Captain Reynolds called me 2 minutes ago to tell me he was arriving. Put your weapon away, uncuff those people, and stand down. Right now." Miller's face went pale, the red flush draining away instantly. He slowly holstered his weapon. David stepped forward, closing the gap. "You put hands on my father?" Miller swallowed hard. "Sir, we had a report." "My father," David interrupted, his voice like grinding steel, "is 70 years old. He has a heart condition. If he has so much as a bruise on him, I will ensure you don't just lose your badge. I will make it my personal mission to ensure you face federal charges for civil rights violations." David turned to the rookie. "Uncuff her." "Now." The rookie fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking so badly he dropped them once before managing to unlock the cuffs on Martha. She immediately collapsed into David's arms, sobbing. "It's okay, Mama. I've got you," David whispered, the stone mask cracking just enough to show the sun beneath the soldier. "I'm here." He looked over Martha's shoulder at Miller, who was standing frozen. "Get my father out of that car," David ordered. Miller didn't move fast enough. "I said get him out!" David roared, a command voice honed on the drill fields and battlefields, a sound that made civilians and soldiers alike jump. Miller scrambled to the back door and yanked it open. Otis climbed out, rubbing his wrists, looking weary and humiliated. David gently passed his mother to the side and walked over to his father. He inspected Otis's wrists, seeing the red welts. He saw the dirt on his father's suit pants, where he had been shoved to the ground. David turned back to Miller. The silence in the parking lot was deafening. The crowd was silent, waiting. "You think this is over because the chief yelled at you?" David said softly. "Miller, this is just the beginning." Miller tried to regain some composure. "Look, Captain, it was a misunderstanding. The truck, it fits the profile of a missing vehicle. I was just doing my job. Your job is to protect and serve, not profile and assault," David said. "And you're going to find out that your profiling just ran into a wall you can't climb over." David turned to the crowd. "Did anyone record the initial stop? Did anyone see him throw my father to the ground?" "I did." The young woman from earlier stepped forward. "I got the whole thing. He slammed him against the truck for no reason." "Me too," a man shouted from the back. I got him drawing the gun on you, too." David nodded. "Please, send those videos to the email I'm about to give you. We're going to need them." Miller looked around, realizing the walls were closing in. "Now wait a minute. You can't just—" "I'm not doing anything," David said, crossing his arms. "But the JAG Corps officer I'm about to call, and the NACP representative my father knows, they're going to do a lot." But the twist wasn't done, yet. As David checked his father's injuries, he noticed something sticking out of Miller's back pocket. It wasn't standard police issue. It was a small, leather-bound notebook. "What's that?" David asked, pointing. Miller instinctively reached for his back pocket. "None of your business." "Actually," David said, his eyes narrowing, "I think it is, because I recognize that notebook. My father gave out notebooks just like that to the youth mentorship program he runs, the one you tried to shut down last month." Miller's eyes widened. "Otis," David said to his father, "did you lose a notebook recently? With the donation cash for the church roof?" Otis blinked, confused. "Why, yes. Last week. I thought I'd dropped it." David looked at Miller. "Why do you have my father's notebook, officer?" The silence that followed was heavy, pregnant with the realization of a crime much dirtier than profiling. Miller wasn't just a racist cop. He was a thief. The humidity in the parking lot seemed to spike, the air growing thick and suffocating. All eyes were glued to the back pocket of Officer Greg Miller. The leather-bound notebook, worn at the edges and embossed with a small gold cross, the symbol of the Pine Bluff Youth Ministry, was protruding just enough to be damning. Miller's hand twitched near his belt. Panic, raw and animalistic, flashed behind his sunglasses. He knew exactly what was in that notebook. It wasn't just the donation money he had pocketed during a routine inspection of the church van a week prior. It was his own scribbles. Miller, in his arrogance, had used the back pages to tally his off-the-books collections from local shopkeepers. He had stolen Otis's property and turned it into a ledger of his own corruption, never imagining he would face a reckoning. "I don't know what you're talking about," Miller lied, his voice rising in pitch. He took a step back, his hand inching toward the pocket to shove the notebook deeper inside. "This is police property, my personal log." "Don't touch it," David commanded. He didn't shout this time. He spoke with the quiet, absolute authority of a man who had led troops into gunfire. "If you touch that evidence, you are tampering with a crime scene." David turned his gaze to the rookie officer, whose name tag read Officer Kinsley. The young man looked like he was about to vomit. He was shifting his weight from foot to foot, his eyes darting between his senior partner and the imposing Marine captain. "Officer Kinsley," David said, his voice cutting through the tension. "You are sworn to uphold the law. Right now, you are witnessing a felony in progress. If you do not secure that notebook, you are an accessory, and I promise you, when the MPs and the state police get here, I will make sure you go down for obstruction alongside him." Kinsley swallowed hard. He looked at Miller. "Buck, let me see the notebook." "Shut your mouth, rookie," Miller snapped, sweat beading on his forehead. "You take orders from me." "Not anymore," Kinsley whispered. The fear of David and the rapidly arriving consequences outweighed his fear of Miller's bullying. Kinsley stepped forward. "Buck, hand it over. There are 50 cameras on us right now." Miller snarled, his face twisting into a mask of pure malice. "You turn on me? After everything I taught you?" "Give him the book, Miller," a voice from the crowd shouted. It was Mr. Henderson, the owner of the local hardware store. "We all know you've been skimming off the top." Miller looked at the crowd. They weren't cowering anymore. David's presence had broken the spell of fear that Miller had cast over the neighborhood for years. The predator was now the prey. With a shaking hand, Miller reached into his back pocket. For a split second, he looked like he might throw it onto the roof of the coffee shop or try to run. But David took one step forward, his muscles coiling beneath his dress uniform, ready to tackle him into the asphalt. Miller froze. Defeated, he pulled the notebook out and shoved it into Kinsley's chest. "Fine, take it. It's just a notebook. You're all crazy." Kinsley held the book like it was a live grenade. He opened the front cover. "Read the inscription," David said. Kinsley cleared his throat. "Property of Deacon Otis Reynolds. If found, please return to First Baptist Church." A collective gasp went through the crowd. "And check the back flap," Otis said softly, rubbing his sore wrist. "There should be an envelope, $600 in cash, for the roof repair." Kinsley flipped to the back. He pulled out a white envelope. He peeked inside and nodded. "There's cash here." "That proves nothing," Miller yelled, desperate. "I found it. I was going to log it into evidence later today. I forgot I had it." "You forgot evidence in your personal pocket for a week?" David asked, raising an eyebrow. "While accusing the owner of that property of theft?" David turned back to the phone he was still holding. "Chief Harrison, did you hear that?" The chief's voice on the speakerphone was icy. "I heard every word, Captain. Kinsley, you are to detain Officer Miller immediately. I am 2 minutes out." Miller's jaw dropped. "Detain me? Kinsley, don't you dare!" Kinsley looked at Miller, seeing the man for what he truly was, a bully who had finally picked a fight he couldn't win. Kinsley reached for his own handcuffs. "Turn around, Buck," Kinsley said, his voice trembling but firm. "You gotta be kidding me," Miller scoffed. He looked at David, eyes full of hate. "This isn't over. You think because you have a uniform you own this town? I have friends. I have the Union." "Turn around!" Kinsley shouted, grabbing Miller's arm. Miller resisted for a second, tensing up, but then he saw the crowd surging forward, emboldened. He saw David standing guard over his parents. He realized he had no allies left in this parking lot. Slowly, Officer Miller turned around. The click of the handcuffs, the same sound he had used to terrorize Otis and Martha just minutes before, echoed through the silence. Otis watched, tears welling in his eyes. He wasn't crying from pain anymore. He was crying because, for the first time in his life, he was watching the system work for him, not against him. "Thank you, son," Martha whispered, clutching David's arm. "Thank you." "It's not done yet, Mama," David said, his eyes never leaving Miller. "We have to make sure this sticks." 3 minutes later, the parking lot became a circus of flashing lights. But this time, they weren't there to intimidate Otis and Martha. 2 black SUVs pulled up, flanking the scene. From the first vehicle stepped Chief of Police Robert Harrison, a stern man with graying hair who had been trying to clean up the department for years, but had been blocked by the powerful police union. From the second vehicle stepped Sarah Jenkins, the district attorney. She was known as the Iron Lady of the county, a prosecutor who had no patience for dirty cops. They walked straight to David. Chief Harrison extended his hand. "Captain Reynolds, I apologize. I deeply apologize that your homecoming was greeted with this disgrace." David shook the hand firmly but briefly. "Apologies don't fix my father's shoulder, Chief, or the trauma my mother just went through." "I know," Harrison said, turning to look at Miller, who was now sitting in the back of the very cruiser he had shoved Otis into. "And we are going to handle it." D.A. Jenkins stepped forward, her heels clicking on the pavement. She looked at Kinsley, who was holding the notebook in an evidence bag he had retrieved from the trunk. "Is that the item in question?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," Kinsley said. "Let me see it." She took the bag. She didn't look at the cash. She flipped to the middle pages where Miller had made his notes. Her eyes narrowed as she scanned the scribbles. "Harrison? Come look at this," she said, her voice low. The chief leaned in. "July 4th. Liquor store, 200. July 8th. Motel 6, 150. July 10th. Church van, $600. Jenkins read aloud. He was keeping a ledger. He was documenting his own extortion racket. Harrison's face turned a shade of purple. That idiot! That arrogant idiot! He thought he was untouchable, David said. He thought no one would ever dare search him. Jenkins looked up at David. "Captain, this notebook is gold. It's not just petty theft. This is a pattern of racketeering. With this, I can bypass the union protections. I can go for immediate termination and felony charges." "Good," David said, "but I want more than that. I want the body cam footage from both officers pulled immediately before it can be accidentally deleted, and I want the dash cam footage." "Way ahead of you," Harrison said. "I've already ordered the sergeant to pull the hard drives from Unit 4 Alpha. It's being done now." Meanwhile, paramedics had arrived to check on Otis and Martha. Otis sat on the bumper of the ambulance, his shirt removed so they could ice his shoulder. A large bruise was already forming, ugly and purple against his skin. David walked over, his anger momentarily replaced by concern. "Pop, how is it?" "It hurts, son," Otis admitted, wincing as the medic adjusted the ice pack. "But I think it's just a bad sprain. No broken bones." "I'm sorry I wasn't here 5 minutes earlier," David said, his voice thick with guilt. "If I hadn't stopped for gas—" "Don't you do that," Martha scolded him gently, though her hands were still shaking. "You were here right when God intended you to be. If you hadn't come, they would have taken us to the station. Who knows what would have happened in the cells?" The reality of that statement hung heavy in the air. In the back of a police van, without witnesses, things could have gone much differently. As the medics finished, Chief Harrison approached the family. He took off his hat, a gesture of respect. "Mr. and Mrs. Reynolds," Harrison said, "I am placing Officer Miller under arrest for theft, assault, and false imprisonment. I am also suspending Officer Kinsley pending an internal investigation into his failure to intervene earlier." "Kinsley tried," Martha said softly. "He was scared." "Fear is no excuse for a badge, Mrs. Reynolds," Harrison said firmly, "but your statement will be noted." Harrison turned to David. "Captain, I need you to come to the station to give a formal statement. But maybe take your parents home first. Get them settled. We can wait an hour." "No." Otis stood up, wincing but standing tall. "We go now. I want to see him booked. I want to see his mugshot taken." David looked at his father, seeing the steel in the old man's spine. "You sure, Pop?" "I'm sure," Otis said. He looked at his beautiful new truck, "and I'm driving my truck there." The Pine Bluff police station was buzzing with a frantic energy. Word had spread like wildfire. The golden boy of the department, Buck Miller, had been brought in handcuffs by the chief himself. Miller sat in Interrogation Room B. He was no longer wearing his belt or his badge. He sat in his undershirt, looking smaller, paler. The swagger was gone, replaced by a sullen, trapped glare. On the other side of the glass, David stood with D.A. Jenkins and Chief Harrison. They were watching the video feed. "He's not talking," Harrison said. "He asked for his union rep. The rep is on the way." "The rep can't help him with what we found in his locker," Jenkins said, holding up a file. While Miller sat stewing, Harrison had ordered a search of Miller's locker and his personal vehicle. They found more than just a notebook. They found drug paraphernalia that had been seized from suspects but never logged into evidence. They found 3 unregistered handguns. "He wasn't just skimming cash," Jenkins said. "He was reselling seized weapons. Captain Reynolds, your father's traffic stop just cracked open a ring we've been trying to find for 2 years." The door to the viewing room opened. A slick-looking man in a cheap suit walked in. It was Gerald Vance, no relation to the forbidden name, just a common surname here, the union representative. He looked sweaty. "Look, Chief," Gerald started. "You can't keep him in there. This is a misunderstanding. The notebook is circumstantial. The cash, maybe he borrowed it." Borrowed it? David turned, his presence filling the small room. He borrowed an envelope of church donations from a 70-year-old man he assaulted? Gerald paused, looking at David's uniform. "And who are you?" "I'm the son of the man he assaulted," David said. "And I'm the witness who caught him." Gerald loosened his tie. "Look, let's make a deal. Miller resigns. He walks away. He gives up his pension. You guys drop the felony charges. We avoid a media circus." "No deal," Jenkins said instantly. "This is going to trial, Gerald. We have the video of the assault. We have the notebook. We have the guns in his locker." "If you go to trial," Gerald warned, his voice lowering, "Miller will talk. He'll drag the whole department through the mud. He'll say he was ordered to do it. He'll say the quotas made him do it." "Let him talk," David said. "Burn it all down. If there are other dirty cops, I want them caught too." Chief Harrison looked at David, then at Gerald. He made a decision that would define his career. "Captain Reynolds is right," Harrison said. "No deals. In fact, I'm adding a charge. Hate crime enhancement." Gerald's eyes widened. "You can't prove that." "He called my father boy," David said coldly. "He targeted them because they were 2 black seniors in a luxury vehicle. He explicitly stated he didn't believe they could afford it. That is bias. That is racial profiling. And in front of a jury? With those bruises on my father? Good luck." Gerald looked at the monitors, where Miller was sitting with his head in his hands. He realized the ship was sinking, and he didn't want to be on it. I need to make a call," Gerald stammered, backing out of the room. Inside the interrogation room, Miller looked up at the mirror. He couldn't see them, but he knew they were there. He slammed his fist on the table. "I run this town!" Miller screamed at the glass, his composure finally shattering. "You can't do this to me. I know where you live, Harrison. I know where you live." "Add communicating threats to the list," Jenkins noted, writing on her pad. David watched the man who had terrified his parents unravel. It was satisfying, but it wasn't enough. He needed to ensure Miller never held a position of power again. "What happens to the rookie?" "Kinsley?" David asked. "He gave a full statement," Harrison said. "He corroborated everything. He said Miller told him to rough up your mother. Kinsley refused the direct order, but didn't stop Miller from grabbing your dad. He's going to face suspension, retraining, and probation. But he turned state's witness. That saves him from jail." David nodded. Mercy for the one who hesitated. Justice for the one who acted. Just then, David's phone buzzed. He pulled it out. It was a notification from YouTube. The video the young woman had taken in the parking lot had been uploaded. It was titled, "Racist Cop Attacks Elderly Couple, Gets Owned by Marine's Son." It had been up for 40 minutes. It already had 50,000 views. "You might not need a jury," David murmured, showing the screen to the chief. "The court of public opinion is already in session," Harrison sighed. "My phone is going to start ringing any second." As if on cue, the station's main line began to ring. Then another phone. Then another. A cacophony of ringing echoed through the precinct. The internet had found the Pine Bluff Police Department's number. David walked out of the viewing room and into the lobby where Otis and Martha were sitting, holding hands. Otis had an ice pack on his shoulder, and Martha was sipping a cup of tea a nice sergeant had brought her. "It's done," David said, crouching down before them. "He's not getting out tonight, or any time soon." "Is it over?" Martha asked, her voice trembling. "The arrest is over," David said. "But the fight is just starting. The trial will be hard. They will try to smear your names. They will try to say you provoked him." Otis sat up straighter. He looked at his son, then at the bustling station around him. "Let them try," Otis said, his voice regaining that deep carpenter's strength. "I have the truth. I have the Lord. And I have the United States Marine Corps on my side." David smiled, a genuine, warm smile. "Damn right you do, Pop." But as they prepared to leave, a man in a sharp, expensive suit walked into the station lobby. He wasn't a cop. He wasn't a union rep. He was carrying a briefcase that looked like it cost more than Miller's yearly salary. He walked straight to the front desk. "I am representing Officer Gregory Miller. I have a writ of habeas corpus, and I have bail money ready." David stood up. The karma had hit hard, but the system was trying to hit back. Miller had powerful friends, shadowy figures who didn't want him talking about the protection fees he collected. If Miller got out on bail, Otis and Martha were in danger. The arrival of attorney Richard Sterling changed the temperature in the room instantly. Sterling was not a local lawyer. He was from the state capital, a man known for defending high-profile corrupt officials and making witnesses disappear under mountains of paperwork and intimidation. His suit was Italian silk, his watch cost more than a house in Pine Bluff, and his smile was as sharp as a scalpel. "My client has rights," Sterling announced, his voice smooth and oily. "And holding him without bail on these theatrical charges is a violation of due process." David stepped between Sterling and his parents. "Theatrical? He assaulted a 70-year-old man." Sterling looked David up and down, unimpressed by the uniform. "Allegedly, Captain. Allegedly. And frankly, your presence here is a conflict of interest. You are intimidating the local precinct." Sterling turned to Chief Harrison. "I want my client released on bond. Now, unless you want a lawsuit for unlawful detention on your desk by morning." For a moment, it looked like money and influence might win. The legal system was slow, and Sterling knew how to exploit every loophole. A judge was called, Judge Holloway, an old friend of Sterling's firm, and within 2 hours, bail was set. It was high, $50,000, but Sterling posted it immediately with a cashier's check. Greg Miller walked out of the holding cell. He changed back into his civilian clothes, looking smug. As he passed David in the hallway, he leaned in. "You can't win, soldier. I've got people who make sure I don't fall. Enjoy your leave. Watch your back." Miller walked out the front door, a free man. Otis looked defeated. "Is that it? He just walks away?" "He's not walking away, Pop," David said, his jaw tight. "He's walking into a trap." David was right. Miller thought he was safe because he had powerful backers, local businessmen, and a corrupt councilman who used Miller to enforce their will. But they hadn't accounted for the one variable Sterling couldn't bribe, the internet. By the next morning, the video of the arrest had 5 million views. It was trending #1 worldwide. The hashtag #JoeJustice for Otis was everywhere. Major news networks were parking vans on Otis's lawn, respectfully, and surrounding the police station. But more importantly, internet sleuths began digging. They found Miller's social media. They found photos of him on vacations he couldn't afford on a cop's salary. They found the names of the businesses he frequented, the same businesses in his notebook. The pressure cooker exploded on Tuesday. Otis and Martha were sitting in their living room, David pacing the floor, when the phone rang. It was Chief Harrison. "Captain, tell your father to turn on the news," Harrison said, sounding exhausted but satisfied. They flipped the TV to the local news channel. The headline read, "Councilman resigns amid corruption scandal." The powerful friends who had hired attorney Sterling for Miller were jumping ship. The viral video had brought too much heat. The FBI had announced a federal probe into the Pine Bluff Police Department based on the evidence in Miller's notebook. Suddenly, Miller wasn't an asset to the corrupt elite. He was a liability. That afternoon, Attorney Sterling called the station. "I am formally withdrawing as counsel for Gregory Miller due to non-payment of retainers." It was a lie, of course. The money was there. But the power brokers had cut Miller loose. They stripped him of his defense. They left him naked to the wolves. But the final blow came from the community. Emboldened by David's stand, other victims stepped forward. A local mechanic produced receipts of Miller demanding inspection fees. A single mother testified that Miller had threatened to plant drugs on her son if she didn't date him. The floodgates opened. Miller was rearrested 3 days later. His bail was revoked by a new judge who cited extreme flight risk and danger to the community. This time, when Miller walked into the station, he wasn't smug. He was weeping. The trial took place 4 months later. It was the fastest trial in the county's history because the evidence was overwhelming. David extended his leave to stay for it. He sat in the front row every day, wearing his dress blues, a silent sentinel behind his parents. Miller tried to plead insanity. He tried to plead self-defense. He even tried to blame the rookie, Kinsley. But the video didn't lie. The notebook didn't lie. And Kinsley, who had taken a plea deal to save his own career, testified against him with brutal honesty. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. "Guilty," the foreman read, "on all counts: assault, battery, false imprisonment, extortion, and official misconduct." The judge, a stern woman who had no patience for those who tarnished the badge, looked over her glasses at Miller. "Gregory Miller, you treated this town like your personal kingdom. You preyed on the vulnerable. You assaulted a man who has done more for this community in a week than you have in your entire life. I sentence you to 15 years in state prison without the possibility of parole for the first 10. Miller collapsed into his chair, head in his hands. As the bailiffs dragged him away, he looked back at the gallery. He looked for his powerful friends. The seats were empty. He looked at Otis. Otis didn't sneer. He didn't mock him. He just looked at Miller with a mixture of pity and resolve. "May God have mercy on your soul, son," Otis whispered, "because the state sure didn't." The aftermath was swift. The city settled a civil rights lawsuit with Otis and Martha for $2.5 million to avoid a federal courtroom showdown. Otis, true to his nature, didn't buy a mansion. He fixed the church roof. He set up a college fund for the neighborhood kids. And he finally retired from carpentry, resting his aching body. But the real ending to the story happened 2 weeks after the verdict. It was a warm Saturday evening. The sun was setting over Pine Bluff, painting the sky in hues of violet and gold. The parking lot of Le St. Clair was full, but there was a reserved spot right in front. The midnight blue GMC Denali pulled in. It shined under the street lights, looking even better than the day it was bought. Otis stepped out, wearing a new suit. Martha stepped out in a shimmering gold dress. They weren't alone. David was there, out of uniform, laughing as he held the door for them. The restaurant was packed. As Otis and Martha walked in, the room went silent. Then, one person started clapping. Then another. Within seconds, the entire restaurant, staff, patrons, and even the owner was giving them a standing ovation. They weren't clapping for the settlement money. They were clapping because Otis and Martha had stood up. They had taken the humiliation, the pain and the fear, and they had turned it into a victory for everyone who had ever been bullied by someone with a badge. The maitre d' led them to the best table in the house. "Your table is ready, Mr. Reynolds," he said, "and the owner insists. Tonight is on the house." Otis sat down, holding Martha's hand across the white tablecloth. He looked at his son. "You know, David," Otis said, his eyes misting over, "I always worried about you going off to war. I prayed every night for you to be safe." David smiled, pouring sparkling cider into his mother's glass. "But I realized something," Otis continued. "You didn't just learn how to fight over there. You learned how to protect. You saved my life, son. You saved my dignity." David raised his glass. "You saved your own dignity, Pop. I just provided the backup." "To 50 years, Martha said, raising her glass, her face glowing with happiness. "To 50 years, Otis and David echoed. Outside, the Denali gleamed in the twilight, a symbol no longer of suspicion, but of triumph. The stolen truck was exactly where it belonged, with the family who had earned it. And miles away, in a cold, concrete cell, Greg Miller sat on a metal cot, staring at a blank wall, realizing that the karma he had served up to others for decades had finally, inevitably, come home to roost. And that is how a corrupt officer learned the hard way that you never judge a book by its cover. And you certainly never judge a man by the truck he drives, especially when his son is a United States Marine. Otis and Martha got their justice, their dignity, and a retirement they truly deserved, while Miller lost everything he had abused. It's a powerful reminder that while authority is given, respect must be earned, and corruption always has an expiration date. What would you have done if you were in David's shoes? Would you have kept your cool like he did? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of karma and justice, please blast that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you never miss a new story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.